A cult is a relatively small group of people who share beliefs or practices which are usually regarded by others as fringe ideas. Many cults will go to extremes to achieve their goals. Heaven's Gate, the People's Temple, tales from these groups chill to this very day. This is what people get when they blindly follow madmen. Florida, 1996. A vampire cult sounds cool, right? A bunch of misfits pretending to be vampires? Sounds awesome. Well, in this instance, it wasn't. Rod Ferrell was the alleged leader of the Vampire Clan, a band of similarly disenfranchised youth. Heather Wendorf met Ferrell in school and soon became part of the group that sometimes drank each other's blood. Because that's what vampires do, right? Ferrell moved back to his hometown, but kept in touch with Wendorf. The teenage girl claimed she was miserable at home. Since vampires stick up for each other, Ferrell and 3 other teenagers drove to Wendorf's home and beat Wendorf's father to death with a crowbar. Wendorf's mother tried to fight off Ferrell, throwing hot coffee on him. Ferrell beat her to death, too. Rod Ferrell is currently serving life in prison. 1994 to 1997. Joseph DiMambro and Luc Jouret formed the Order of the Solar Temple, or the OST, in 1984. The religious sect believed Jesus was a solar god who would eventually return to Earth. Regardless of what they believe, the crimes associated with the cult have smeared its good name. In 1994, a sect member's 3-month-old son was stabbed to death with a wooden stake. No, the kid wasn't a vampire. It's rumored that one of the sect leaders ordered the murder, believing the boy to be the Antichrist. DiMambro and 12 followers held a Last Supper. A few days later, suicides were reported throughout Switzerland. OST members and their families. 53 in total. Some consumed poison. Some shot themselves. Adults and children dead because of their devout beliefs. On December 23, 1995, 16 bodies were discovered in the Vercors Mountains of France. 2 of them shot the others and then committed suicide by shooting themselves and then setting themselves on fire. On March 23, 1997, 5 members killed themselves in Quebec. They were found in a burning house. If there have been more mass suicides since, then they have not been publicized. Alabama, 1991. Joining a cult can be hazardous to one's health, as William Alt discovered. He worked in a traveling carnival with Jimmy Pinnock, Mark Goodwin, and Keith and David Lawrence. The foursome reportedly engaged in satanic activity. Alt wanted to join in on the fun. After he was denied entry, he used his knowledge about a murder Pinnock committed to blackmail his way into the cult. One evening, the 5 men went to a secluded farm building. Alt was asked to lie down on a makeshift altar where he was tied and gagged. Using a knife, Pinnock made a deep cut on Alt from the neck to the stomach. The other men also made cuts in the form of an inverted cross. Pinnock then asked Alt if he was ready to die. After Alt answered, Pinnock slit his throat. The men cut off Alt's head and hands and attempted to burn them. The 4 men and a female accomplice used money stolen from Alt to have dinner at a local Arby's. Pinnock pled guilty to murder and was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Chicago, 1981 to 1982. The Ripper Crew, or the Chicago Rippers, was a cult and organized crime group composed of serial killers, cannibals, rapists, and necrophiles. Robin Gescht, Edward Spreitzer, and brothers Andrew and Thomas Kokoralis were the primary perpetrators to a series of gruesome crimes. The first victim of the gang was 28-year-old Linda Sutton. She was abducted on May 23, 1981. 10 days later, her body was found in a vacant field, her left breast amputated. 1 year later, they abducted Lorraine Borowski from her job at a real estate agent's office. Her body was discovered 5 months later in a cemetery. Their list of victims totaled 18 with the same MO: abduction, murder, and mutilation. Thomas Kokoralis confessed that he and the others had taken women back to Gates's place, a place they dubbed the Satanic Chapel. There they raped and tortured the women, amputating their breasts with a wire garrote. The men also allegedly would eat parts of the severed breasts. The Kokoralis brothers and Spreitzer confessed to their crimes, but Gescht protested his innocence. Gescht was convicted of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 3 60-year sentences and 1 30-year sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2042, when he will be 89 years old. Edward Spreitzer is serving a life sentence for first-degree murder, having his death sentence commuted. Andrew Kokoralis was executed in 1999. His brother Thomas was released from prison in March 2019 after serving half of his 70-year sentence. He is 60 years old. California, 1997. The Heaven's Gate cult was formed by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in the mid-1970s. They believed they were extraterrestrials from heaven who offered humans a chance to move to a higher plane of existence. Group members gave up their material possessions, vowing to live a life free of indulgences. Some male members of the group went as far as undergoing castration. In 1997, the appearance of the Hale-Bopp comet signaled the end of 39 cult members. Applewhite claimed a spacecraft traveling behind the comet would take them to the next level they so desperately wanted to reach. The mass suicide occurred in a rented mansion in California. It took place across 3 days, in shifts. Each member first drank juices to cleanse their body of impurities. Then they each consumed a concoction of phenobarbital mixed with vodka. They placed plastic bags over their heads in order to induce asphyxiation. 2 months later, 2 additional members attempted suicide in a hotel room. One died while the other survived, only to succeed several months later in the Arizona desert. Colorado, 2020. A woman who considered herself the spiritual leader of a doomsday cult in Colorado has been sentenced to 64 years in prison for her role in the deaths of 2 children who were banished to a car without food or water because the girls were thought to have been impure. Madani Seuss considered herself the leader of a doomsday cult. The state considers her a child killer. Sisters Michaela Roberts, 10 years old, and Hannah Marshall, 8, were found dead inside a vehicle parked on a farm in Norwood, Colorado. Seuss claimed the 2 girls were possessed by unclean spirits during a past life and ordered them to be kept in the car as the group waited for the end of the world before the 2017 solar eclipse. The exact cause of death could not be determined because the girls' bodies were found in a partly mummified condition. The cult leader was sentenced to 64 years in prison. The children's mother was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The farm owner struck a deal, pleading guilty to an accessory charge. He was sentenced to prison for 12 years.